This morning, we're talking about parent burnout during the pandemic. It is real and it's taking its toll on so many people out there. And whether it's navigating online learning or perhaps it's isolated childbirth, detachment to family or community, it is easy to feel alone and exhausted, all while trying to keep the home ship afloat. Child and youth therapist Tania DaSilva joins us this morning to dig deeper into this topic. Tania, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just jump right in. When I think of this topic, I almost think of a juggler who's just trying to keep all of these balls in the air, and after a while something's bound to fall, and I'm sure that that is what so many parents out there are feeling. Let's talk about how this is taking an effect on parents day in and day out during this pandemic.
We're definitely seeing it a lot more because we've been in this pandemic for so long now. So if we're looking at general burnout, for most of us, that means that we're lacking social support, we're taking on more than we can handle, we're not practicing proper self-care, and there's other external stressors that are starting to build up. So if we look at COVID, that's exactly what's happening. We've lost our social supports. We're taking on more as parents who are trying to do a job or run a business as well as homeschool. We're not practicing self-care the same way. And there are so many stressors like financial worries and other things that are coming up during this time.
Absolutely. And you have to think, too, that majority of parents out there may feel, I don't have time to stop and pause and, worry about myself for a second. I have a child or I have kids whose needs need to be met. The bus must keep going. The show must go on. So what are ways, and I know it may be hard, but how people can just stop and pause, even if it's just for a few minutes out of their day in order to make themselves a better parent? Because at the end of the day, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing is first knowing how they're actually experiencing burnout. So for some of our parents, it is that exhaustion where they're feeling like they're running on empty, they're in survival mode, and it's really just starting to make them feel a lot more stressed out. So a strategy that we use if they fall into that category is a method called the 3Ds. So thinking about, every morning when you wake up, what's everything that you need to get done, and looking at what's one thing that you can drop, something that really doesn't need your attention. What's one thing that you can delegate, whether that's to, a tutor or even to a therapist or even to kids themselves. Like, can you dress yourself? Can you go make your own snacks? And what are some things that we actually need to do? So what's a top priority for my day? And I find parents breaking that up really helps them start moving from just feeling constantly exhausted to they're a little bit more in control and they're actually getting things done.
In this time of the pandemic, so many parents may be in what's called autopilot. And you think about it, it's very natural to do that because you're just constantly going. But why is being in autopilot a bit dangerous for parents?
Well, and that's actually one of the other burnout stages where they are feeling like they're detached and they're just kind of going through the motions. And that actually causes a lot of parents to feel guilt about not connecting to their kids. So it actually puts us in a place where we're not realizing what's going right either. So it adds to that burnout and that low mood. So what we've been doing with families is really getting them to think about throughout the day, what's going right? What are you enjoying? What are your kids enjoying? And being even just conscious just in those moments, because if we are, then it starts shifting our mindset to, okay, I don't need to be on autopilot. Not everything is going, horribly wrong. There are some moments throughout the day that my kids are successful online or that they are happy and we're still enjoying moments, whether that's bedtime, snack time. So it's looking for those moments to move us from autopilot.
You talked about the online learning because that is a big chunk of parents' problems, or at least top of mind when it comes to their kids. I mean, that's the reality. And you have to think about it, too, that there are some cases where perhaps there's a generational gap. Perhaps there's grandparents also assisting in the mix of all of this, just trying to help the family mold, keep it afloat. When it comes to online learning, because there are parents out there that, hey, they may not have opened an algebra book in who knows how long. How do they start or stop to feel as if they're not doing enough, or they may not be doing an adequate job in helping their kids get a proper education online these days?
Well, and that's actually the last phase of burnout. It's feeling like you're not effective and that you're not coming up with solutions. So we always try to stress the fact that this is a big problem. So the education system, the health system, everybody's still trying to figure it out. And no one's really been, super effective. We're all still kind of going through the motions. So I always tell parents, to be easy on themselves in that sense. And it's also separating people from problems, because what we naturally do is, if there's a problem and we're feeling burnt out and stressed out, we sometimes offset it, where it's like, my child can't do it, or the teacher is not teaching them properly. And that really doesn't help us find solutions. So it's looking at, who am I blaming for this, and how can I remove them from the equation and really think about, what are my solutions? So even with that generational gap, well, what's the actual problem? That I don't understand the platform. So maybe, I can take a couple minutes to sit with someone so that I feel more confident assisting, or, whatever it might be, but just really thinking about, what is the problem here, and what is even one small step I can take to make this a little bit more manageable for me and my family.
Sometimes it's easy to give grace to other people, but it's very hard to give grace to ourselves. Real quick before we run, what would be your last bit of encouragement or tips for parents who are listening this morning?
I always tell parents, throughout the day, because it is hard, to really just check in and ask, is this my best, and why is it my best? And then, is this good enough, and why is this good enough? And that really helps us kind of move from that parent guilt and that burnout to being more graceful towards ourselves, because we start realizing that it is good enough and we are doing our best while we're parenting during a pandemic.
Absolutely. Well said. Child and youth therapist Tania DaSilva, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us some pretty great perspective. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.